it actually gets the grain on it, it bows over. But the tare stands straight up. Sometimes you don't know what's growing in you until it starts to bear fruit, because when you bear fruit, you bend over. You get humble. You know, sometimes what looks like confidence in you might be arrogance, but you don't actually know it until it comes to fruit. And I'd suggest that confidence always looks like arrogance to people who are insecure. So you judging other people is probably a bad plan, because I'm not even sure you know what's growing in you. Well, I'll just make it personal. I don't always know what's growing in me. I remember thinking how before we got married, I thought that one of my attributes was patience. Yeah, I know some of you are like, even we know that. And then we got married, and that went pretty well, and then we had our first child. And I'm like, yeah, patience is not one of the attributes I hold dearly. And, you know, what I'm getting at is opportunity doesn't create you, it just exposes you. Nobody makes you mad. Mad had to be in you. Come on. That person made me mad. No, that person created an opportunity for you to see what was growing in there. You know, when Jesus said, if someone hits you on the right cheek, give them your left. Some people think Jesus was passive. I propose he was not. I propose he was saying to us, if someone hits you on the right cheek and you give them, and you hit them back, then you're living in reaction. Their action becomes your action, and actually you're controlled externally instead of internally. I propose that Jesus was saying, don't let anyone control you from the outside. Let the kingdom in you become the kingdom around you. If you think Jesus was passive, then you have problems with lots of other behaviors in scriptures, like when Jesus turns over the tables or sits at dinner with the Pharisees. He's like, you Pharisees, you're like whitewashed tombs full of dead man's bones. Pass the potatoes. I propose that Jesus was an activist, and that he wasn't the pussycat that religion makes him, but he was actually an undomesticated lion of the tribe of Judah that was frankly unpredictable. I don't even know where I'm going. I hope this has something to do with my message. But at this point, what I'm getting at is this. We tend to be afraid of things we don't understand, so we tend to put things that happen or people that we follow in a box that we can understand. It makes us feel better about ourselves. But it's mostly not real. Okay, well, never mind. I don't know if that was going anywhere anyway. So, Joshua chapter 1, would you turn there? I had something happen to me the other day. I had hernia surgery about, I guess it's been almost a month ago. And so I was out of work right before the holidays, and of course the holidays came, so I was basically out of, you know, I usually preach about 4 or 5 times every single week, and I hadn't preached in 3 weeks. I hadn't been around people except for my family for several weeks, and that's very odd for me. Even on vacation, it's usually interacting with people, but the surgery and all of that just took a lot out of me, so I was just resting. And then last Sunday actually, I was slated to preach 4 times on Sunday morning. So whoever preaches Sunday morning preaches 4 times. So I was Saturday night. I usually have something going on, like something like a theme. Usually the way messages come for me is the Lord is doing something in me, and it kind of creates a theme. And out of that theme come usually 1 or 2 or 3 messages. And Bill used to say, you know, that I never study to teach, I only study to learn, and whatever feeds me feeds them. And so I learned that I'm not to study to give someone an intellectual message, that I'm actually to take what God's doing in me, and if I'm a shepherd, then I just give the flock what God's feeding me with. But for that 3 weeks, I was a little bit, probably you guys would know, like I was a little out of commission. I was like, you know, it's one of those times I was resting and I wasn't even thinking about what I was going to share with people. And usually, because if you preach 4 or 5 times a week, you find yourself always in this mode, like, what is the Lord speaking to the people? What is the Lord speaking to these people? Or if you're traveling, what's the Lord saying this? But for me, if you're home, you're kind of like, I just disengaged. And I'm like, there's nobody pulling on me for what's God saying. And I kind of got in neutral mode, which for me was good. But Saturday came, and Sunday morning, I have to be up at 5 and be ready. So Saturday morning, I woke up early, and I just started to get in, okay, what are we doing? What's happening? What am I supposed to share? And something happened I haven't had happen for a long time. I started getting really anxious. And I started to, instead of getting a message, I started picturing myself in front of 9,000 people, like we preach every Sunday. And I started to think, well, I have nothing to say. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen if I get up there and I don't really have a word? Or if I don't have a good word and I have to share it 4 times, what's that going to be like? What's it going to feel like to have people staring at you and knowing that you don't have anything really to say? And I really, by the time, you know, how many of you have ever been there before? I'm sorry. All 3 of us, I started getting really anxious. And Kathy woke up 2 or 3 hours later, because it's like 5 in the morning, and I was still in kind of purple in a war. And so I said to Kathy, would you pray for me? And she's like, what's going on? I said, I'm just really anxious about preaching tomorrow. She's like, anxious about preaching? When did that start? I said, this morning. My wife, you know, we've been together since she was 12, so she knows me really well, and she's like, you were born for, all the stuff that our partners do, She's encouraging me, she's praying for me, and, she gets done praying for me for 15 minutes or so, and she's like, how you feeling? I'm like, anxious. So I put something together Saturday, and then Sunday morning I got up at 5, like I usually do, and I had so much anxiety about preaching. I was having these reoccurring imaginations of failing, and it really pushed all my insecurity buttons. And Eric Johnson was preaching that night, and I knew he'd be early at the service in the morning, so I'm like, I'm going to call Eric this morning. And I'm going to just tell Eric, why don't you take the morning services, because there's 4 of them, and I'll do the night. And so anyway, I was kind of just going through this a real struggle. And so I thought, well, maybe I should actually pray about what I'm supposed to do. It feels weird when you get paid to pray and forget to do that. So I said, Lord, this is your poor servant. Don't talk too well today. For me, wah. And I was just in that mode. I was like, Lord, am I anxious? I don't know if I really have anything to say. I have this message prepared, but I just feel anointed, and I'm wondering if you want me to have Eric do the morning, and maybe give me a few more hours, And the Lord said to me, this is what He said to me: you need to put on your big boy pants. He said, you need to stop feeling sorry for yourself, boy. You need to put on your big boy pants, and you need to get out there and do what I called you to do, and stop feeling sorry for yourself. Now get out there and do what I told you to do. It didn't make my anxiety go away at all. It kind of put me in, I'm more afraid of him than I am of y'all. And I'm like, all right, so I was preaching a message on this message on the House of Acts. So I want to take you to Joshua chapter 1. Joshua chapter 1, but I'm going to do it in my Bible. Verse 1. Now it came about after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, his servant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and cross this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the sons of Israel. Every place on which the sole of your foot treads, I have given to you, just as I spoke to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites as far as the east of the great sea, towards the setting of the sun, will be your territory. No man will be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I've been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you, and I will not forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall give this people possession of the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and be very courageous. Be careful to do according to the law which Moses, my servant, commanded you. Do not turn from it from the right or to the left, so that you may have success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that's written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you will have success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. I want to kind of set the stage for what's happening here. God spoke to Moses, as you'll remember, at the burning bush, and Moses heard the audible voice of God. And Moses was commissioned by God, and Moses did wonders and miracles and signs. You'll remember the plagues, the Egyptian plagues, and the rod, the staff that Moses threw down and became a snake, and God had him pick it up by the tail. And by the way, let me just say that rod was always the snake, and Moses just didn't know it. In other words, what you're good at is a snake. You have to hold it by the tail, because God wants you to know that it's what you're good at that will get you in trouble, not what you're bad at. Because when you're weak, he's strong. But when you're strong, something else happens in our lives. And so Moses did wonders and signs and miracles. He heard the audible voice of God. God meets him at Mount Sinai, and God says to Moses, listen, here's what we're going to do. You're going to go talk to the people in front of Mount Sinai, and I'm going to come with thunder and lightning and with miracles. So listen to this. And God's saying to Moses, so that the people will believe in you forever. They already believe in me. I want them to believe in you forever. And Moses was probably, well, without a doubt, he was the greatest man in history at his time, bar nobody. And his spiritual son Joshua was with him, and then Moses dies. Now, I really wanted to emphasize this because I feel like some of you, your Moses is dead. All the promises of God were actually facilitated in Moses. That God trusted Moses to take him from Egypt to the promised land. But the truth is that Moses failed and could not take the people into the promised land. After 40 years of trying, Moses could not get them in the promised land. And God says to Joshua, the way I was with Moses, I'll be with you. Is there anybody else up there? Because I'm like, I've been with Moses, and Moses actually failed. Now, I'd like to just propose to you that, you remember when Jesus was up on the Mount Transfiguration? You remember who was up there with him? There was who? Moses and Elijah. Why wasn't it Abraham, the father of faith, and David, the man after God's heart? Or Enoch, who walked with God and was no more? Or Sarah, you get the idea. There was a lot of characters who could be up on a Mount Transfiguration. But why was it Moses and Elijah? Well, how many know when Peter's, there was Peter, James, and John up there. If you had Ringo, you'd have a band up there. And when Peter sees Moses and Elijah and Jesus, he says, let's build 3 churches. One for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for Jesus. And remember the audible voice from heaven says, this is my beloved son. You remember what he said? Listen to him. How many know that Jesus came to fill the what? The law and the prophets. Why was it Moses and Elijah? Because Jesus came to fulfill the law, Moses, and the prophets, Elijah. You know why Moses couldn't get into the promised land? Because Moses represented the law, and the law doesn't belong in your promised land. See, Hebrews says that what happened to them was a shadow of the real thing. Now, in other words, God was writing through the sands of time the Gospels. So Moses took them out of Egypt, and they crossed what? The Red Sea. And how many know you received Jesus Christ? And Hebrews says that you were baptized. They were baptized into the Red Sea, into the blood of Jesus. And there's a baptism into the blood of Jesus that takes you out of Egypt. But I propose to you, it doesn't take you into the promised land. It only gets you out of Egypt.
That's right.
Moses, the law can get you out of Egypt, but it won't take you into the promised land. So a man named Joshua, which is the Hebrew name for Jesus, had to take them across the Jordan River. How many of you know when they crossed the Red Sea, they crossed on dry land? And when they crossed the Jordan River, the people crossed on dry land, but the priests got wet. Why? Because how many know that there's a river that God put in you that's running out of your belly? And I propose that there's a second baptism. That the priests have to get wet. That you literally, that there is a river running through your soul. And so Joshua takes them across a Jordan River. But before they can come into the promised land, they have to go through 3 cities. Do you know what the 3 cities were? The first one was Adam. And how many know before you can come into your promised land, you have to leave your old man there. You have to leave Adam behind. Do you know what the next city was? It's a city named S-I-N, sin. And how many understand you can't bring sin into your promised land? You know what the last city was before they came into the promised land, all the way into Canaan? It was Gilgal, and it means to be circumcised of heart. How many know it's not Moses? The law can't. What the law couldn't do, weak as it was, Joshua did. The Lord did. He took us into our promised land, and He took us past our old man Adam, out of sin, and He circumcised our hearts so we can actually stay into the promised land. And but the part that I was really intrigued by is God says to Joshua. God said to Joshua, listen, I want you to become successful. How are you going to know if you're successful? Because you are going to bring everyone into the land I promised them. This is your mission if you should receive it, Joshua, that you measure success by the fact that you took people, and I promised people some land. And your job is to make sure that they come into the land I promised them. So your success is in their success. And I want to say to you that if you have a vision that's not bigger than you, you don't have God's vision.
My God.
And then God says to Joshua, don't be afraid, don't be dismayed, don't be discouraged, but be strong and courageous. There are people in this room, you think that, you know what, if I was as brave as Sue, as Che, as Gabe, as somebody you really admire, if I had that kind of fearlessness, then I could do what God called me to do. And I'd suggest that God's not calling you to fearlessness, He's calling you to courage. And the courage is not the same as being fearless. I see all these people that are terrified wearing no fear shirts. And I think that most people think there's just a few people in the world, they just do what they do because they're so freaking fearless. And I propose they're not fearless, they're courageous. And that means that you don't let fear tell you what to do. That you don't let fear dictate your destiny. I ask our students every year, I say, if you were 10 times bolder, what would you be doing? And if it's anything other than what you're doing, fear has already reduced you. I believe that fear is the most socially acceptable sin in the body of Christ. And I think it kills more people than pornography or abortion or any other thing. I think fear takes most people out of their divine purpose. I said that last week, and people are writing me, where is fear in the Bible as a sin? How many know 1.5 million people got a prophecy, you're going into the promised land, and only 2 went in? And it says they disobeyed the Lord because they were afraid. How many know they worshiped an idol, but that didn't keep them out of the promised land? They sinned. They performed sexual acts, but that didn't keep them out of the promised land. Only one thing actually kept them out of the promised land, and that was that they chose to be afraid instead of to believe. I'm saying you should be pure, sexually pure. You ought to be moral. You ought to be noble. All those things, of course, are paramount. But bottom line is, well, one thing that will for sure keep you out of your promised land is when you do not choose courage. And courage is fear that said its prayers. And I believe that there's always a divinely placed giant at the door of your destiny. Listen, if your promised land, if you can't see a giant, it ain't your promised land. If there's something worth having, there's something worth resisting. If you have no resistance, you probably are on the wrong path. And I've said this for years. There's the dogs of doom stand right at your doors of destiny. One of the ways that you know you're going the right way is you're terrified to go any further. I remember when I was in Weaverville, I said some of this last night, but for 17 years we had a youth group and home group at our house, 2 days apart. And for 15 of those years, I never one time was on time for the meeting, even though I was home, because I was in the bathroom with the runs. A half an hour before youth group and a half an hour before home group, every single week, I would have the runs. And I'd be on the toilet and I'd say to Kathy, can you greet the people? And I'd always be 10 to 15 minutes late trying to get off the bathroom toilet. And I would sit there and I'd say to God, why do I hate the thing I'm anointed to do? And it was only a couple of years before I came to Bethel that I actually had any kind of peace before I preach. And I have students all the time come to me and say, you know, God's called me to preach, and every time I stand up, I'm anxious, and I just want to know when that's going to stop. I'm like, somewhere around the 15th year. Man, we got to get out of wimp mode, man. Wham, 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 send the ambulance. Last night we were talking about houses of Acts. We weren't talking about them having them, we were talking about you having them. And people were like, yeah, and I know what happens, you know, you got the Sunday morning yeah, and then you got the Monday morning no crowds. What happens if we bring a bunch of people over and Jesus doesn't show up? Well, what if he does? And I'm simply saying, you know, it's the reality of I'm not feeling it. Like, you know, if I was really anointed, wouldn't I feel it? Probably not. I love what Bill Johnson says. He said, if you don't run into a demon once in a while, you might be going the same way. You turn to 1 Samuel chapter 17. I want to talk about the most famous story in the entire Old Testament. It's the story of David and Goliath. I'm sure you know the story. In verse 1, now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they camped between Soko and Aztec in Ephes-David. Now, I'm not sure that's how you pronounce Ephes-David, but, you know, I'm not sure that you know how to pronounce it either. Because Hebrews goes something like this.
Right.
Last year we graduated 127 German students. What's your name? My name is... I mean, where did they get that for a language? Thank God there's Americans that speak the language of heaven. My goodness. Have you ever been to the UK? I'm about to go there. Like, what did they do to a perfectly good language? I went to Singapore for the first time, you know, years ago. And they're like... Hi, I'm Kris. I'm like, oh, what's your first language? English. What did you do to the English language? Sorry if you're at other, it's just me being funny. But, you know, be careful. I know. Mom Sue's in the front row. She's like, You're right on the edge. Remember Donald Trump, you're right on the edge. It's funny because all the scholars, you know, they all want to correct you about the way you pronounce names. And then, have you ever heard Michael Brown preach in Hebrew? I mean, and he's got, like, he actually speaks the language. I'm like, they're all screwed up, you know? That's how that you actually pronounce that. Anyway. They were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah, and they can't listen to this. Between Soko and Aztec in Hebrew, it means between a rock and a hard place. And Ephes-David means on the edge of blood. Part of the challenge, you're like, I want to see miracles. Well, put yourself in a place where you need one, and you'll see them, or you'll die. And then you'll go to heaven. You know, if I said to you, if you have a terminal disease, stand up. You would all have to stand up because you're all terminal. You're all going to die. The question is, are you ever going to really live? That's the question. And I believe until you have something to die for, you don't really live. And I love this verse because it says that David, when he arrived, this armies of Israel between a rock, Soko, and an Aztec, a hard place, and they were right on the edge of blood. And I believe that that's where Jesus meets you most often, right on the edge of blood. If you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. Verse 4, then the champion came out from the armies of the Philistine named Goliath. Goliath means arrogance or pride. From Gath, whose height was 9'6". He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was clothed with scale armor that weighed 127 pounds. He also had bronze greaves on his legs and a bronze javelin slung over between his shoulders. And the shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the head of his spear, it weighed 17 pounds. And he had an armor, a shield bearer who walked in front of him. Verse 8. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel and said to them, why do you come out to draw up in battle array? Am I not a Philistine, and you are servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight me and kill me, then we will all become your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall all become my servants of service. This is really profound because, have you ever had anyone ask you, are you under a covering? You have a spiritual covering? Are you under a covering, like, at night? How many of you have been asked that question? Like, do you have a spiritual covering? You're like, I don't know. I go to church. I pray. What is a spiritual covering? Goliath said, send me a man. If he kills me, we will all serve you. But if I kill him, you will all serve us. What does it mean to have a covering? It means that someone had a personal victory that became a corporate covering, so that people did not get treated the way they deserved, but they got treated by the way the champion deserved. It means that you have a spiritual leader that's actually had personal victories so that they can have corporate coverings. It means that your leader's victory covers you, in that giant no longer troubles you, not because you beat him, but because he did.
Yeah,
and I'd like to suggest there are a lot of people trying to have a corporate covering, but they've never actually won a personal victory.
Come on.
This is what it means to actually be under an apostolic house. It means that your apostolic leaders have won personal victories. They've broken through the lines. They have destroyed their giants. And they have created a place of peace, not because you deserve it, but because God does. Okay, we should go on. Verse 22. Then David left his baggage in care of the baggage keeper. And he ran to the battle line and entered in order to greet his brothers. Interesting, it says that David left his baggage with the baggage keeper. That's to be contrasted with 1 Samuel chapter 10 about King Saul, the king that's actually leading the country at this time. And it said when Samuel went to anoint Saul to be king, it says, and Saul was hiding in his baggage, in his luggage. Saul was hiding in his baggage. But David left his baggage with the baggage keeper. How many know if you're going to fight giants, you have to leave your baggage behind? If you're going to be, are you guys okay?
Yeah.
If you're going to be a champion, you have to get rid of your baggage and you have to leave it with the baggage keeper.
Come on.
So many people, they want to fight giants, but you're dragging around their baggage. Their regrets. Well, I wish I would have, and what if I had, and maybe I could have, and I've had a divorce, and I've had this thing in my life, and I failed, and I used to be addicted, and it's like, let's leave that with the baggage keeper. Amen. Are you following me? Yes. Leave regret and disillusion. And last time I had a giant, God didn't come through, and I had this failure, and I was really believing God, and the guy died anyway, and here I am, and then I meet my giant, and I'm like, I'm so exhausted from the war I'm fighting inside, I have no ability to fight this war. And I'm saying, listen, if you are Saul, you're hiding in your baggage.
Wow. Amen.
People get identified from their crisis instead of their Christ. What was the name of the man that was at the pool of Bethesda? He's not named. You know why? It's not important. He's the man who was there for 38 years. He's not once named because his identity wasn't in his name. It was in his crisis. And some people are identified by the thing they went through. I've listened to people tell their testimonies as if they have to relive it every time they tell it because they still live it. It's still going on in them. Like it happened 20 years ago, but they've never gotten past it.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to get past our past. Anyway. I know. I'm right. Verse 25. Then the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who is coming? Surely he is coming to defy Israel. And it will be that the king will enrich the man who kills him and with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who were standing next to him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away this reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? The people answered him accordingly to the same word, and thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Let me say this, it's always about the woman. I mean, Jesus died for the bride. Elab, his older brother, heard him when he spoke to the men, and Elab's anger burned against David. He said, have you left? What have you done coming down here? What have you done leaving these few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and your wickedness of heart. You have come down here in order to see the battle. Before you fight your giant, you almost always have to fight your brothers. Elab's the oldest brother. David has 3 brothers that are warriors. David's not one of them. And they for 40 days, it says that the armies of Israel, this is the way it describes the armies of Israel. It says that every time the giant got up, it says that they trembled with fear. How many know that you want the giant killed if you're one of the armies of Israel, but you don't want your kid brother to kill him? Yeah. If you're the one who's afraid. And Elab says to him, what are you doing? Go back to those few sheep in the wilderness, you insignificant little punk. And David says to him, what have I done? And who's the woman? Jesus, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And the Bible says he died for a bride. How many know that you have to have something to live for? There's got to be something on the other side of your cross. There's got to be a vision. Without a vision, people perish. Then Saul clothed David with his garments and put a bronze helmet on him and gave him his armor. And David girded his sword over his armor and tried to walk, and he said, I can't do this. I haven't tested these things. I can't use this armor. I want to tell you that people always have an idea of if you're going to actually engage a good giant, the fearful people always have some idea of how you should do it.
Yeah, right.
They're called critics. There are 2 kinds of people in the world. People who do stuff and people who criticize the people who do stuff. Well, that's not the way. Listen, you can't go out there with a rock. That's unconventional. Well, you're not doing anything with your sword, so. I love this part, verse 41. Then the Philistine came on and approached David with his shield bearer in front of him. And when the Philistine looked and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, ruddy, with a handsome appearance. He was like me. And the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you came out to meet me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine also said to David, "Come to me, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field." Then David said to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down, and I will remove your head from you, and I will give your dead bodies to the armies of Philistines this day, to the birds of the sky and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And that all the assembly may know that the Lord does not deliver by sword or spear, but the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hands." Yes. It doesn't matter what your enemy thinks of you, it only matters what you think of you. And verse 48 says, "And when it happened that the Philistine rose and came and drew near to meet David, that David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet the Philistine." And I want to say that procrastination assassinates the revelation of the Lord. Like when the Lord gives you a decree, the best thing you can do is start running to it. If you spend enough time thinking about how big the giant is and how much his shield weighs, you get about halfway there and you're like, "I feel another assignment coming on." And what I'm getting at is this, is that oftentimes we get anointed in a certain meeting. It might be in church on Sunday or maybe a conference like this, and we're like, "That's what I'm going to do. I'm getting rid of my baggage. I'm leaving with the baggage keeper. I'm putting on courage. I'm going out with the anointed with the weapons God gave me, which are different than anyone else's, and I'm going to kill that giant in my land, and I'm going to eradicate it from my children and my children's children, and that's going to be it." And by Monday morning, I'm already not anointed. I'm already thinking about, "Oh, what's Johnny going to think? And what's my, and then I tell somebody, and my older brother goes, "That's crazy, how 40 people died trying to do that." And, this is, and pretty soon I've talked myself right out of anointing. And what I'm getting at is this, is that when God anoints you to do something, the best thing you can do is run to the battle line. Like, don't think. I'm not saying thinking's bad, but I'm saying once you're anointed, don't think. Just run. None of it will make sense on the way to the battlefield. "I'm going to kill this guy at the rock." Really? I wrote this. "The thing is, the longer you avoid the problem, the bigger the monster grows, until someday it finally eats you. It's best to beat it while it is still a baby monster." Most of the problems we have in our lives, we've had the same ones for years. They changed names. They have many aliases, but it's the same monster. And and we always think, when this thing happens, I'm going to really engage. When that happens, I'm really going after that. And we think the planets are going to line up and something's going to happen. I'm going to get one more prophetic word, then I get that one. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know if that guy was really anointed." I'm waiting for another confirmation, and I have my 48 confirmations, and I'm like, someday I'm going to feel it, I'm going to really do it, and something's going to happen, and I'm going to engage. It's like, that ain't going to happen. The day you engage, you're going to be just as afraid as all the other days before, and one day you're going to make a decision by your will, not your want. And you're going to say, "This is the day the Lord's made, and I'm going to engage this, and if I die, I die," and you're going to be like Esther. I love what Mordecai says to Esther. "Esther, you were born for this." And then he says to Esther, "If you don't go in and talk to the king, you and your family will perish, and the Lord will raise up someone else in your place." Yep. Sometimes we just have to understand the fact that it's going to feel this way until you engage the enemy. I'm convinced that most of the time it's courage that actually takes us into the battle. It's not fearlessness. It's not even a feeling of anointing. Wow. Before David engages the enemy, David says this to Saul. Your servant was tending his father's sheep when a lion or a bear came and took out the lamb from the flock. And I went out after him and attacked him. And I rescued it from his mouth, and when he rose up against me, I seized him by the beard, and I struck him and killed him. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, since he has taunted the armies of the living God. I love this. You know, most shepherds are business people. And they think like business people. And they think, you know, if a lion or a bear comes and steals one of the sheep, I call it shrinkage. You know, we have it in every business. Like in retail business, I was in retail business for years, and we like 2% of our inventory, people are going to steal it, they're going to mishandle it, they're going to break it, and I just add it right into the profit. And most shepherds are not going to run. And I tell you this, no shepherd's going to run after a bear or a lion. It's going to be like, okay, let's just try to protect the rest of the flock. But David says, I saw the lion and the bear, and I went out after him. And I grabbed the sheep away, and when he turned around, I grabbed him by the beard, and I killed him. I killed the lion, and I killed the bear. And this guy, he'll be just like one of those. And what I'm getting at is that what you do in private, when no one can see it, when nobody cares, is actually what gives you the power in a public. In public. I'm saying lots of people want to kill a giant, but they never killed a lion. They've never killed a bear. They've never actually had a private victory.
That's right.
I remember when we were in Weaverville, for 5 years I preached at the convalescent hospital. And they would bring in like 10, 12, 15 people. Most of them had dementia. And we would go from room to room a few minutes before. We'd invite them all in, and they would come. And, you know, and I was trying to learn, like, what are my weapons? And so I tried Bill's weapons, you know. I tried Bill's style. You know, Bill, he reads, then he makes a point, and then he stands.
Yes.
You're like, oh my God, my God. Where did he get that? From the Bible. And people quote. They share a quote, and they're like, Bill said that. It's actually word for word, Jesus Christ. And so for years, you know, I followed Bill. He's my very first real preacher. And so, you know, I tried to be Bill. You know, I would prepare, and then I would share a verse, you know, just like Bill did, with, you know, no emotion. But this is Bill mad. This is Bill troubled. This is Bill happy. This is Bill exuberant. And you just stand behind the podium and just share. And then people are like, so I tried that. And when I did it, people were like, oh, poor guy, he forgot the rest of his message. So then I'm like, well, that isn't working. So I used to watch Jimmy Swaggart. This is before Jimmy fell. And Jimmy would, you know, he would teach a little, then he'd get his Bible, and he'd start crying. And then he'd be, and the Bible said, this is the sword of the Lord, and we need to. So I'm like, all right, well, you know, I'll try that. So the years in the convalescent hospital, I'd teach a little bit, and I'd get my Bible, and I would pace back and forth, and I'm like, and the Lord says unto you, you think you're going to die, but the Lord says He's resurrecting you. And when I would preach like that, they would all pee. True story. They'd get excited and pee, and the nurses would come and wheel them out and mop while I finished my message every Sunday for 5 years. That's what to do. I mean, the nurses would they'd always prepare. He's about to make his point here. Nurses, but you know, how many know you got to practice at home before you have a public encounter? And what I'm getting at is that what you do at home matters. I have just a few more minutes, so are you guys all right? I don't know if you're bored. Sorry if you are, but... The second point... Paul Manward got up and he's like, I have 37 points. It shouldn't take more than 2 hours. Oh no. Actually, it was a great message. Second point is this. Well, let me read to you. 2 Corinthians 4:7. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that the surpassing greatness of the power will be of God, not ourselves. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. We are perplexed, but not despairing. We are persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying about in the body the dying of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifest in our body. For we who live are constantly being delivered over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifest in our mortal bodies. So that death works in us, but life in you. But having the same spirit of faith, according to what was written, I believe, therefore I spoke. We also believe, therefore we also speak. I just want to just make this a very simple point. The second part, the second attribute of great leaders is that don't give up. But you don't give up. Have you guys seen the movie yet? I think it's called The Darkest Night. It's a Winston Churchill movie. What is it called? The Darkest Hour. Great movie. You know, Winston Churchill warned the British that Hitler was going to take over the world, trying to take over the world, and of course you know what happens, that when Hitler invaded France, they finally said, the British finally said, we better go get Churchill. He's the only one that actually knew that this was going to happen. And they tried to get Churchill to make peace with Hitler. You should watch the movie, it's great. I've been to Churchill's house, he wasn't home, but I mean, there's just this one great part of the movie. The whole movie is actually just, it's just the climax of the movie when Hitler is taking over. He's just ransacked France, and most of the Parliament is trying to get Churchill to make peace with Hitler. And Churchill ends up on this bus, the subway, and he asked the people in the subway, do you think we should, would you like me to make a peace treaty with Hitler? And people start standing up on the bus and say, never, never. Well, what if we all died? I'd rather die than make peace with Hitler. And so on the way to Parliament, Churchill stands up and gives this great speech, part of the speech. Even though large tracts of Europe and many old famous states have fallen or may fall in the grip of the Gestapo and the odious Nazi ruler, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight in the seas and on the oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air, and we shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills, and we shall never surrender. And if I do, which I do not for a moment believe, this island or part of it is subjugated and starving, then our empire beyond the seas, armed and guarded by the British fleet, would carry on the struggle until God's good time, the new world with all its power and might, steps forward to rescue and liberate that of the old. And I just want to stand up in the theater going, that's what goes on in me all the time. Like, we will not quit. We were born to lead. Like, this is our finest hour. I was in a meeting with several of our leaders, city leaders, and our city has been under onslaught for 20 years, and we have very high crime, and we have a serious problem of homelessness, and our poverty index is twice what the nation's, and I mean, we're just in a bad situation. Like Nehemiah, when he gathers all the leaders and he says, you see the bad problem we are in? And so I gathered these city leaders, some of them not Christians, at a room in our church, And I was a facilitator. Actually, somebody said, would you come to this meeting? I said, why don't we just do it at our church? Because it ended up being like 15 or 18 guys. And these guys have been leading our city. And so they're in a meeting, and I'm sitting there, supposed to be kind of quietly listening. And about 45 minutes of we can't, and things are bad, and things are terrible, and we tried that initiative, and that didn't work, and it was going on and on like that. And these are the women and men leading our city, and it went on for 45 minutes. And as they kept talking, I was getting more and more angry. And this is the first time I've ever met with these leaders. They don't even know me. And finally, I stood up and I hit the table. I said, "This is not what we're supposed to be doing. We are here to win, and we will win." I said, we have 9,000 people in our church, and there's only 90,000 people in our city. I said, if 9,000 people can't change a city, the world is lost. And I began to say, I looked at all those leaders, I said, God's calling you to courage. He's calling you to stand up for what's right. I've been here for 45 minutes listening to why we can't and where it won't work. And I said, I realized today that the problem with our city, which I thought was the economy, is actually leadership. I said, we have a poverty mentality with our leaders, and you men have been leading for 20 years, and it's time for you to put on courage and take these people into their promised land. It's time for you guys to stop complaining and figure out how to get us out of this mess. And you all smart. that's why you're around this table, because God has anointing. And I began to tell each one of them. And then I sat down and I thought, you know what? I was good, but probably I won't get invited back. And I realized in our town of 90,000 people, we were one of the worst cities in America to live in 10 years ago. We were listed on the bottom 10% of cities in America. I said, this is bullcrap. This cannot happen in our city.
Yes.
This cannot happen in our watch.
Yes.
You know, I wrote a book, Destined to Win, and I say this in the book, like, until you find your people, you can't find your destiny. And the Lord said to me in the midst of writing that book, right before I finished it, He said, you got it partly right, but you haven't got it all right. I said, what's all of it? He said, you don't just have a people, you have a land. So, you know, Isaiah 62, and it says, and to your land shall you be married. And I began to realize that until you marry your land and say, this is my land, what happens in this land is my business. This land's not going to change until it is your land. Not their land, not the city I live in. This is my land. This is my city. Yes. And what happens in my city is both my responsibility, my business, and my fault. Yes. If it happens on my watch, then I cannot be passively walk by and say, those people, those government officials, those that, you know, what's happening with our city council. It's like, if you got a problem with it, do something about it. Something has to happen in us where we actually say, it's not their fault, it's my fault. You know the number one way you avoid shame? You shift blame to someone else. Well, you know, our president, you know, that's the reason I don't have a job. It's the president of the United States' fault I don't have a job. I'm like, are you serious? Well, there are no jobs. Then go start a business. Right. This is America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. Your parents probably migrated here. Mine did. Because they were looking for a new land. I'm saying it takes courage, but it also takes I don't quit. I don't give up. If it's by land, we will fight them on the land. We will fight them on the sea. We will fight them on the beaches and in the air. But we will prevail. I'm telling you that we prevailed in the Second World War because Churchill infused people with courage. He did the same thing that God did to Joshua. He said, I want you to stop being afraid. I want you to stop being dismayed and depressed. And I want you to put on courage. And I'm telling you, this is a very simple message. It's not going to get simpler than this. But this is oddly profound. That we actually figure out what's going on in our city. You know, we're in California, one of the most liberal states in the nation, where abortion's growing, and then homosexuality, every kind of perversion is happening in our city. And we're like, oh, we're going to move out of the city. We're going to move out of our state. It's like, no, we're going to move into our state. This is our state. I remember when we lived in Weaverville, there was, you know, we didn't have very many stores. There was a little C-store called Tops Market just down the street from my house. And my neighbor actually was one of 4 brothers who owned that store and the supermarket in our town, the only supermarket in our town. And I went in there one evening late at night on my way home just to get some orange juice. And I walked in and there was 2 young high school guys, probably 17 years old, 18, and they were milling around the store. And I grabbed my orange juice and I was just heading for the counter, tired from a long day and dirty from being in the shop. And out of my right eye, I saw them putting stuff in their pockets. And I'm like, oh, well, they might just be carrying it to the counter. But I decided that I'd just go find something else and get behind them. So 3 or 4 minutes goes by and they stuff their pockets with stuff. And then they got some gum or something and they brought it to the counter and they said, we want to pay for this. And I'm like, so I get behind them. They said, I want to pay for this. I said, how about the stuff in your pockets? They said, oh, we don't have anything in our pockets. I said, listen, you need to pay for the stuff in your pockets. And the guy behind the counter, the employee goes, oh, it's okay.
Oh, my. Yes, that's right.
I said, it's not okay. And he said, I don't have anything in my pockets. So I grabbed one of the guys and I started shaking him. The stuff started falling out of his pockets. And the other guy looked at me and I said, I'll shake you next. You have 2 choices. You will either pay for this stuff or you'll leave it here. And the guy behind the counter, he's all nervous, and he's like, oh, it's okay, they don't have to pay for it. And I said, and I'll be talking to your boss before I get home to my house tonight. They put the stuff back and walked out mad, and I said, I won't forget your faces. You don't want me in your face again. And I walked out of there, and I went home. God said, oh, they could have beat you up. Yeah, but then I just go to heaven. I wasn't thinking of that. I wasn't like being brave. I was mad. Like, this is my city. This is my friends. This guy lives right next to me. We've talked about his financial struggles and how hard it is to make a living in a small community. And I'm like, I am not letting these kids make it worse. This is my friend. This is my town. Telling you, until we take ownership of our own communities, the place is going to go to hell. We're going to blame everybody else. It's the senators, it's the congressmen, it's the governor, well, how about you? What are you doing? Well, what can I do? You can lay down your life for something worth dying for.
Come on.
Yes.
You can start a house of Acts.
Come on.
I'm pretty much done. I just believe that courage is the answer. I see a lot of people, the same people, conference to conference. I love it. But when your greatest testimony is 12 years old, that's a problem. That's a problem. We all have great testimonies, Obviously, my greatest testimony is coming to the Lord, but I better have some really great victories in between. I'm not sure what I'm doing. And sometimes I think it's like our salvation is so stagnant and all the best thing happening is Netflix.
Right.
And I'm convinced that sometimes, I said sometimes, everybody, sometimes I think that we watch television, we like, us guys, we like these action movies, but what's happening is it's siphoning off the thing we live for because we live in a virtual reality. We get all of the emotion and feeling by watching someone else do it, and when by the time we're done with the movie, we're tired. I'm like, I don't know about you, but I was born to change the world. I told my congregation last week, I said, I told God, when I'm really old and the doctor says you got 3 months to live, I'm going to go to Iraq and preach in the streets and then get him to kill me. I don't like pain. I have this allergic reaction to it. So I wanted to cut my head off, don't torture me. And I told the Lord, I'm going to, when I die, this is how I want to die. I don't want to die of natural causes. Because I want a big old mansion. I want to get martyred and have a big old mansion in heaven. And the Lord said to me, this is a true story. The Lord said to me, this is many years ago. He said to me, if you walk the streets of Iraq and you die and they kill you, you won't be credited as a martyr. You'll be credited as being stupid.
going to get yourself.
I'm just saying. How about you? Are you bored? I mean, people are bored today. Our kids are bored. We got people joining ISIS for what? You know, you want to oppress women? What is the great draw of joining a terrorist group? Because I want to have something exciting worth dying for. And I'm like, we need to do our job. We need to tell our people, this is your land, this is your problem. And we need a Joshua moment. Stop being afraid. Put your big boy pants on.
Amen.
Put your big girl pants on. That neighbor who's been tormenting you for 10 years, you need to say, I'm getting a strategy. I'm going to go over there and listen to them or me. I'm going to be so kind to my enemy. I'm going to love my enemy. I'm going to love the hell out of my enemy. I'm going to love them so often. They're either going to change or they're going to leave my neighborhood.
Right.
It's going to be like the wicked judge, like she comes over every day with cookies. I'm so sick of cookies. And we just began to push until we don't quit. You know, perseverance is a fruit of the Spirit. That means the devil doesn't have it. Sometimes if you can't overpower him, you just wear his butt out.
Come on.
Are you with me? Would you stand, please?
Come on.
I went over a few minutes, I'm sorry. Put your hand on your heart. Say this. I was born to change the world.
I was born to change the world.
I'm a history maker.
I'm a history maker.
God gives me courage
God gives me courage
and anointing
and anointing
when I choose
when I choose
to step into my destiny,
to step into my destiny,
past the dogs of doom,
past the dogs of doom,
and take out my giant,
and take out my giant,
so that my children
so that
and my children's children
my children's children
live in peace
live in peace
and prosperity.
prosperity.
In Jesus' name.
In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you so very much. God bless you.
Praise the Lord.